Mahwish Syed is a very well known interior designer in New York City. She's also a colleague of mine through the Quantum Biology Collective. And I wanted to have her on to talk a little bit about how she uses quantum biology in her work. But more importantly, I wanted to talk to her about her book, Purgatory to Paradise. So, Mahwish is a cancer survivor, and she talks about her journey through cancer that has led to a more authentic life. I thought we were going to be talking mostly about quantum biology and light and interior design. And we ended up having a beautiful conversation about mythology. Her book is amazing. I absolutely love it. I didn't realize that Mawish and I both have this profound respect for the unseen. And so we just connected on that. And this was the kind of conversation, you know, how you have a business conversation or something, and you realize that was exactly what I needed to hear at this time in my life. Yeah, that's what it felt like for me, that Mawish was talking about things that were like a gift for me at this particular time in my life, reminding me of things that are important to me. So I hope you enjoy this episode as much as I enjoyed talking to Mawish. Hi, Mawish. Welcome to the show. I'm so excited to have you on the Nurse Soul podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Kelly. Really appreciate it.
Well, I knew when I started the Quantum Biology Collective, I was really drawn to your energy. Well, because I mean, you're a beautiful person. And you always look so put together. And, half the time on those calls, I'm like a little not put together. But besides that, like I loved your comments and your questions and the way that we would talk about things. And then to learn more about your background and your journey with cancer all just really was, fascinating for me to learn more about you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for saying that. And it's lovely to connect over a shared passion and to see where we land with each other, right?
I know. Yeah. Yeah. So I want to hear about what brought you to the Quantum Biology Collective and why you started studying quantum biologies. But I know we got to talk about your book. I ordered the book. I thought it would be here before we chatted, but it's not. But that's okay. It's beautiful. So, From Purgatory to Paradise, beautiful book. So, we'll talk about the book, and I'm sure that has to do with your journey and how
Yes.
you made it to quantum biology. But I also just kind of wanted to see how things have shifted for you, because you were always you have a long career in fashion and interior design. So, how have things changed mentally, physically, environmentally, in every way?
I love your questions. Fantastic. Purgatory to Paradise was basically my ode and my introduction to more books that are going to be coming out. So it's just the beginning. And it's laying the foundation. As I say, I planted pomegranate seeds. The ideas that I have in that, I actually fleshed out. I'm putting together a course called Claim Your Paradise. And that segues into exactly what you're talking about. Basically, it's for people who've gone through any kind of illness, whether that's cancer or an autoimmune, whatever it is. But I'm speaking personally from my point of reference and what cancer represented to me. It was my doorway to freedom. It was a moment of sheer self-reflection and insight and an opportunity as well to look at life differently. And that is exactly why I ended up joining the group, because I started auditing my environment, epigenetically speaking. I started looking at basically the causes of cancer, and I realized that the majority of them are environmental, meaning it could be not just where you live, but how you live, your mental state, your emotional state.
Right.
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 So in that, I really, it was so interesting because I think from going through cancer and coming out the other side, I started doing things differently. I started really taking stock of my body and the mind-body connection, the soul connection. And that's a lot of what my book is about, is we're putting the soul back into the science.
Mhm.
And I think there has been a separation between that, between spirituality and medicine. And I think it has a lot to do with our vocabulary. And for me, it's really important to frame that vocabulary where they're in a marriage together. And
Mm.
that is what I used as a metaphor in my book, the idea of Persephone, the goddess Persephone.
Mhm.
And here's where she's linked to circadian rhythm, by the way.
Uh-huh.
The goddess Persephone, she's known as the goddess who gave us the seasons, right? And the reason why we have the seasons is that she was, quote unquote, kidnapped and taken down to Hades, which I liken my cancer as being Hades, basically taken against my will. And then suddenly I didn't have a choice. I was suddenly immersed in my underworld. And so when I was down there, and while she was down there, she eats these pomegranate seeds. Now, for every seed that she ate, because it was food of the dead, she had to stay 1 month, like at a certain time, like 6 months out of the year, she spends with her husband and 6 months with her mother, Demeter. So that's why we have the seasons. So, interestingly enough, there's like concentric circles to this. In our own lives, we go
Mhm.
through cycles. We
Right.
go through cycles of death and rebirth. And I think from a spiritual perspective, and this I wrote in my book, even with autophagy, with our cellular recycling, right? So there are moments where we are constantly cycling between life and death, whether we know it or not. And I think it's so important to bring that out. So, one of the things that I wanted to talk about also was the concept of death and how, in terms of medicine, the drama triangle, it's the villain. The doctor is the hero, and the illness is the person as the victim. Right. And there's this kind of narrative that happens. It's underneath the surface. And most people just kind of follow along. But those of us who are saying, okay, well, let's stop and look at this narrative. Let's look at this mythology. Let's break it down.
Mhm.
So, what I did was basically redefine what cancer meant for me,
Mhm.
redefine what death means for me, and what life in turn means for me.
Wow. I mean, all of this is bringing up so many things. I just want to point out, I want to circle back to autophagy, just in case people don't know, like, what is the autophagy? I mean, it's the way our body cleans itself. It's how our cells, that and apoptosis. And a lot of that is happening overnight. Hopefully, if we live our lives in this very rhythmic way, our body's able to cleanse itself through the I think it's happening through the day too, right? But especially at night. But you're right, these cycles that we have every single day that are working for our benefit, that are actually, but it has to do with death and life and death and life, all in the cycle of a day and a season and a year. So I think that that is beautiful. It's a beautiful way. I love that you're weaving the spiritual in with the medicine and understanding our understanding of circadian rhythms and quantum biology and our mitochondria and all of those things, how much that's actually a part of mind, body, spirit.
Yes, exactly.
Mhm.
And I love exploring this quantum space because it allows me, it affords me that vocabulary to shift my perspective and looking at, you know, I'm a big believer in the unseen over the seen. I'm a
Mhm.
big believer in, hey, I don't know this. Let's investigate. Let's explore. Let's be detectives. Let's not just assume that we have all the answers. What else can we look for?
Right. I talk about this a lot, right? And these blind spots that we all have. But also, what I've learned in my own spiritual journey is that rarely is anything as it seems. So, though actually actively, consciously looking for what is not seen, what you don't quite understand. And there is this piece of the magic that people, and you might, I want to hear what you have to say about this because I think there's an actual quote, which I don't know, but I'm just going to tell you my version of it, right? The magic that we seek in life, that kind of transformation and magic and power that we seek in life is actually found in the places of resistance and uncomfortable, like the things we don't know, that we can't see, that we think we know something, and then something like a diagnosis like cancer can show you how much you don't know about something, like even
Yeah.
your life, right? But it's
Yes.
in those places, like you mentioned, that a diagnosis of cancer was an
Yeah.
opportunity to re-examine your life, to look at things differently, do everything differently. And so I feel like we have these small opportunities where there is, even where we're maybe pissed off in our lives, or something just we're like, no, that's not right, or the resistance or whatever it is
Mhm.
actually the place of opportunity for that
Yes.
magic that we're seeking.
Exactly. I call it your light and shadow, and we need
Mhm.
both, or your upper
Right.
world and underworld,
Ooh,
meaning
I like that.
as above, so below.
Right.
So that darkness, the
Mhm.
shadow, the things that we don't own for ourselves because we're either we resist it. We resist feeling, oh, I have this the simple idea of being human, Kelly, is about accepting that shadow, accepting the fact that you're going to be tired sometimes and not constantly productive. We're not meant to. If so, then we would always have day and no night,
Mhm.
right?
Right.
So these back to these cycles, accepting your shadow, accepting the fact that you don't know, that you can't see.
Mhm.
So that is important. And you just reminded me, one of my chapters in my book is called Calamity is Catharsis. So what appears to be a calamity can be your catharsis, can be your opportunity to learn something new about yourself.
Yeah, I love that. So for you, what kind of person were you before the cancer? Were you somebody that's super open? Because I'm just thinking of the difference between the people who shut down, don't heal, or have a really struggle, really, I mean, like cancer struggle, I mean, having an illness is struggle. But the difference between somebody who opens up to the opportunity and somebody who closes down. Like, were you somebody who was already really positive and open or what?
I was, and I was like Chlore. So Persephone gets her name from finally going into the underworld. She becomes a queen only after her initiation. I wasn't initiated. I was innocent. I was naive. I was in a toxic relationship and I was on that treadmill, constantly being drained
Mm,
so much through my cancer treatment. And I think for me, I've been through so many other challenges, health challenges, that I can look and go, okay, wow, what did I learn from that one? Well, maybe I can apply those principles here. But what changed for me
mhm,
was I realized I had to accept the truth,
mhm.
the the naked truth. So I start my story with a beautiful painting that is the truth coming out of her well. And it's an allegory about how sometimes what appears to be truth can be lie dressed in truth's clothes.
Mhm,
And the naked truth is something everyone avoids. And I think the stigma of cancer and the shame of cancer and the self flagellation that people feel like they've done something wrong, this kind of moral judgment that they cast upon themselves keeps them closed. And
mhm,
I just want to mention, I come from a culture, Pakistani Muslim, very traditional. And I wasn't born here. I was born in Pakistan. English is my second language. I have a really strong connection to my family, and my maternal aunt passed from the same diagnosis only the summer prior to mine. And she, I hate to say it, did not seek help in
mhm.
the right time because there was so much stigma and shame attached to that body part. It was breast cancer.
Right.
And so she finally, when you're pushed and pushed and pushed, and you finally have to seek help. And I talk about this in my book, this false virtue of a good woman who sacrifices herself, who puts herself last. And I do think that plays a huge part in how one self actualizes,
Right.
especially during sickness.
Right. I mean, you bring up so many good points in that. I think I'm just curious if you have more to say about, that truth, that naked truth. Like, how do you get at the naked truth? Because I think a lot of us think, well, I'm looking for the truth, but that's what I mean by blind spots. Like, it's not
Yeah.
because I,
You
in my
know why?
experience, you choke on the truth. It's not easy to swallow, right?
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. Love that. Um, I think we are a society that has been taught to look outside of ourselves for
Yes.
validation,
Yeah.
for externals, for education. And I think there is a lot of wisdom in looking within. It's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It's uncomfortable. You have to meet yourself down in your underworld,
Hmm.
that shadow side of
Hmm.
all these. And I do believe we have so much agency, Kelly. I believe that we have the power to shift and evolve and change if we can meet ourselves in that uncomfortable, dark place
That
in those moments.
That's what I'm saying, that the magic is in the darkness, meeting yourself, but meeting it with the light of you. Like, I feel like we also have, you're right, we have this agency. We also have a light that is
Yes.
unique to us. And if we carry that with us into the underworld, that seems like a smarter way to move in the underworld of ourselves.
Yes, exactly. And I want to add to that.
Okay.
You don't have to remain down there.
Oh,
And I
right.
think that the back to
Hang
the
out down
cycles
there.
of life,
Yeah.
we have our cycles.
Yeah.
We have our cycles. We have to sleep at night. That's a real thing, right? That's a really important for our health. And we realize all these other things that, as a designer, I'm looking around like what I can do from a circadian perspective. But on a poetic level, we can cycle. So what I call commute between life and death, commute between our shadow and our light, commute between sadness and happiness, because you can't remain always one tone. And that's the vibration, the real vibration of it is of balance.
Right. Yeah, I speak of it a lot in harmony now, that coherence. So it's not,
Yes.
I think people get the wrong impression that it's always about high vibes. We're trying to raise our vibes, we're trying to raise our vibration, but we're actually trying to, what you're saying, that commute, but we're trying to actually be in harmony. Those frequencies are in harmony. It's not necessarily about high and low. It's
Right.
more about
Right.
harmony. Yeah, and not always I mean, you're right, it's messy, it's not fun to meet ourselves in that place, but that is really where the magic is, that's where the transformation happens. And
Yeah.
so on a really practical level, because you 'cause you're an interior designer, so
Yes.
what aspects are you bringing from quantum biology? And I'm even thinking about, like, how you changed your life physically. What are some of the things that you were like, "Oh, I'm gonna shift the way I
Oh
do
my
things."
God. Exactly. Great question. Gosh, where to begin?
Right, it's yeah,
On
a lot.
on an internal level, I really started paying attention to my food. And again, in my course, I talk about auditing everything. So it's
Mhm.
eating and studying. I was already, I thought, eating well,
Yeah, right.
but this is a whole other level. I'm trying to grow my own food. I love soil. Like I'm interested in soil science. Like I am creating soils. I'm creating like a microbiome. So what is your internal microbiome and your environment is the macrobiome, right? So
Right.
it's the connection between the two. That's our living ecosystem. So I'm really trying to shift and evolve the way in which I do things and also creating space for emotions instead of powering through.
Right.
I wrote in my book, I used to think I was Wonder Woman. I love being Wonder Woman. And I realized I no longer want to be Wonder Woman. I'm not a superhero. And this idea of pushing through pain and just being stoic isn't healthy in the long run. It might get things done in the short term, but your body will tell you, your body keeps the score. So you will feel that. And that's what I recognized, is to create space for rest,
Yeah.
to allow myself to sleep, to go to bed early, that 1 hour, which to me is a luxury, even getting into the bedroom by 9 o'clock. So it's kind of simple little things like that. And of course, I'm a big believer in creating coherence in terms of beauty and the healing power of beauty, Kelly. I think there is something in it. It's a science and an art.
I just got chills. So I think so obviously that's me. My body is saying, "Oh, that's important. Pay attention to that." Beauty has always been something that's important to me, but not, something I pay that much. Like, it's something that I feel like is in my human design that's important, but that I don't necessarily pay that much attention to. But I've always been into the placement of things and more the feng shui kind of, the flow of things. But the beauty part, do you want to say more about that?
Thank you. Beauty is defined, again, it's how we frame things, right? We've
Right.
Beauty has been hijacked by the beauty industry. It's a commercial product that's sold back to us. But the beauty that I'm speaking of here is divine alignment,
Oh, yeah.
that it's
Yeah.
divine grace. It is, you're on a cellular, subatomic quantum level,
Mhm.
that harmony between all those parts of you. And our body extends out, our auric field extends out, our electromagnetic field extends out.
Mhm.
So, how do we interact? How we can interact with our environment and how our environment interacts with us? That's that dance, that sweet spot. That is the beauty that I'm talking about.
Okay. Yeah. That's important. I mean, that's really ultimately, I think what we're after is that kind of alignment. And for me, just to get really practical about it, I just wasn't thinking that a patch of dirt outside and the light inside, inside and outside, I wasn't really paying attention to how that was affecting me and how much that could heal me.
Mm, yeah.
I didn't really connect a patch of dirt as the beauty that it is.
Oh, I love getting messy. I love my hands in
Dirt.
dirt.
Yeah.
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 I've grown up gardening. And it's funny because I live in Manhattan, and people are like, how do you manage to? I'm like, I do. I manage. And we have a living garden inside. And it's so important to have that connection to the soil. And I bring there's a sentence in my book: soul and soil are one vowel away from being the same word.
Mm, wow. Yeah. And once you start learning about soil, that's another, rabbit hole that I've gone down some too. And you learn about how important our soil is to everything in life and on the planet. And it's really powerful to think about the soil and how we can support regenerative farming and practices, right?
Exactly. And that's connected directly with cancer and the
Of
prevalency of
course.
of this
Illness.
epidemic, because
Mhm.
what we imbibe affects everything.
Right.
So it's really key. But back to beauty, I
Yeah,
think
that's
in terms of your environment,
yeah.
um, color frequencies,
Mhm.
certain colors, the light, as we know, is
Yeah.
so essential.
Yes.
And people don't realize it. I have a client who, I was in her bedroom the other day, and her blackouts were still drawn. And I'm like, do you ever open your windows? She's like, no, I'm like, this is so important. Like, all of a sudden, the simple practical things, like open your window.
Right.
Like, we're
Oh,
in New York.
yep. Open a window.
Open a window.
Mhm.
So it's so interesting, even talking about and thinking about biogeometry
Mhm.
and how the shapes of things affect our cellular coherence.
Mm.
And so there's so many rabbit holes we can go down.
I know.
But in terms of practical,
Yeah, let's keep it
yeah, keep it.
practical for people.
What can people do?
Yeah.
Um, get sunlight into your space.
Yeah.
Find a way. And also, I want to mention mirrors.
Oh, yeah.
Mirrors reflect. So, since sunlight isn't polarized, you still can derive benefit. I have used, like, like you're in a vampire movie and you're like shining mirrors down to the. So, I have used mirrors in spaces where I can harvest that light into a room, deeper into the recesses of a room using reflection. I
Mhm.
mean, skylights do that all the time.
Right.
So it's simple little hacks like that.
Mhm.
And also, oh my gosh, materials, Kelly. I'm so my background, I came to New York through the Metropolitan Museum of Art.
Mhm.
I worked in the textile department. I worked on 2000-year-old Egyptian linen. So I have a big textile passion background. I've been
Uh-huh.
sewing since I was little. And the fabrics that we use to upholster our sofas, the rugs that we use
Mhm.
affect, not just in terms of VOCs, like
Right.
off
Just
gassing.
toxins. Yeah.
Right. So I use wool a lot,
Okay.
100%,
Yep.
linen
Mhm.
a lot, and cotton and hemp and basically natural materials. I tend to stay away from synthetics
Yeah.
altogether.
Yeah.
So in terms of our energy.
Mm.
So it's simple things like that that create coherence and alignment in your body. And beauty is within reach. And this is what I'm a big believer in. I've been in Gotham for a long time. I've been part of an image factory. I work on high end projects. And I believe that everyone has access to beauty, whether their bank account shows it or not. I think we all deserve that. And a lot of people that I talk to feel sometimes that they can't afford it. Like, I can't afford to have that. I'm like, yes, you can.
Mm.
It's just creating a space and an opportunity for yourself to reach for these things. And once you do, you realize that all of that beauty is at your fingertips.
And I'm guessing that has to do with that commute between the light and the dark and that getting making space for the emotions, that psychosocial, emotional, spiritual piece. Like
Yeah.
to really, if it's all frequency and energy, that that deserve the belief that you deserve beauty and that you
Yeah.
deserve the healthiest of products, whatever they might be, or carpets and textiles and all of the natural substances around you. I think the belief in that, if to work with our beliefs, to me sounds like you got to go to the underground and back up,
Hmm.
working with yourself and your beliefs around that.
Exactly. So true. And it's funny because I grew up in a very humble space and I grew up
Mhm,
with my grandmother dyeing things by burning newspapers and creating ash.
mhm,
And I did a collection downtown when I had my shop. I tea dye dresses.
mhm.
So I used natural materials to dye the clothes, whether it was hibiscus flowers or onion skins, things like that. So to me, that's wealth. And
That's
I think
right. Mhm,
how we define wealth
mm,
has to shift
yeah.
away from a monetary to something that is soulful.
I 100% agree. I was walking the dog this morning and thinking about my grandmother and her home. There was something that a smell
Yeah.
reminded me of her home when I walked by, and I thought, "Oh, it was tiny and perfect," and I never thought of it as being too small or cramped or anything like that. It was such a lovely, and she would open that screen door and say, "Get on in here." It was like it was just a very welcoming. So
Yeah.
when we redefine what, and to me, that is wealth. That is that kind of love and connection, and really getting back to simpler, cleaner things. If you're gonna have, sometimes I feel guilty of wanting the things like, oh, that's beautiful. I want that. So I work with myself on that as well because yeah. So I think that there's a balance there.
Desire is actually a really healthy thing.
Mhm.
I think
Mm.
having a desire for something is that
Mhm.
flame,
Yeah.
right? That lights you up and moves you in a direction that otherwise you would have never gone.
Mhm.
And so I think that, we villainize desire sometimes too, because we've seen maybe the symptoms of too much access, right? But let's not villainize desire because the desire has a spiritual purpose. So,
It's kind of reminding me, our conversation is reminding me that pretty much everything has a spiritual purpose.
yes,
Mm.
yes, it does. You're
So,
so right.
yeah.
And back to what you were saying about your grandmother,
Yeah.
it reminds me of a story. I don't know if you know of the story of the girl with the red shoes.
Mm.
So it's this young girl who lives at the edge of a forest and she fashions her own shoes made from scraps and bits of pieces of fabric. And then there's a woman who comes by and a wealthy woman who picks her up in the carriage and says, I'll take care of you, but we have to burn your shoes because they're just gross. So she lives this life of opulence, but restraint. And the idea of those red shoes, she still misses her red shoes. So one day they go to the cobbler to buy her new shoes for church, and she spies these red shiny patent leather shoes and she really wants them. And the story goes that she kind of tricks, and the old woman couldn't see that well between red and black. So she picks the red shoes and she puts them on. She loves it, right? But then there was a man outside church who says, oh, I love your shoes. Can I have a dance? And so she starts dancing, and she dances and she dances and she dances until she realizes that the shoes are dancing her,
Oh.
that she is not in control.
Mhm.
And so it's a parable of the fact that we miss that. We don't realize those bits of us, those authentic, humble bits of us
Mhm.
that were just as beautiful as those fancy shoes.
Mhm.
And that and again, this is the metaphor that I'm using for my next book, because I had my shop that was my little red shoes. Those were my
Right.
little
Yeah.
pieces. And so, what do your red shoes look like?
Right.
How do we fashion that together? How do
Mm.
we bring the beauty back? Because that's about self actualization. It's about agency. It's about something you do for you that is about you and it's not for anyone else but you.
Mhm. Yeah. That's beautiful. Yeah, so you've got more books coming soon? Coming, do you
In
know?
the next year, this goal for me, it's my 1 year anniversary of my book as of yesterday. And
Wow, yay.
yeah, it's been wild. It's a wild ride. It's been wonderful. And I really was invested in bringing out and fleshing out the threads that I was weaving together in this book, Purgatory to Paradise. And so the program that I designed is for patients and providers to create a home from a quantum perspective
Mhm.
and from a designer's perspective that basically breaks down the essentials to have a healthy home and a beautiful one too.
Oh, I love that. So I'm sure covering light
Yes.
and where people can get the right kind of light, and then tricks to bringing more light in.
Yes.
Yeah, all of that. Um, yeah, what are there other pieces without telling us too much about it so that people what they can expect to find in the program?
Sure. Also, there's aspects that deal specifically with cancer and
Okay.
going through cancer treatment. And a lot of it is mindset, because I actually started doing workshops with the local hospital here and using my design techniques to help ameliorate suffering and the experience that people went through going through cancer. And one of the things that I realized is no one felt beautiful. No
Oh,
one felt beautiful. And people
right.
felt like they needed to recover or get out of it before they allowed themselves to feel beautiful again. And I think it's the opposite. Beauty and pleasure were are really your vehicle to healing.
Mm,
So embracing the beauty in the darkness
mm,
is the way to light and lightness. So there's a lot of that broken down in the course that I talked about in my book.
mhm. And then how to create a home and
Yes.
more
So your
specific.
home, exactly.
Yeah.
Your body
Uh-huh.
is your home.
Right.
And then your home is again a metaphor for your body.
Okay.
So I kind of cycle between the two and the synergy between you inside and you around you. It's a beautiful dance. And that balance, and how do we create that balance? That's something that I'm constantly discovering, Kelly. It's not
Right.
like it's a
I know.
finished thing.
Done. Right.
It's like, what about this? It's like a dish that you keep adding ingredients to, and you're like, oh my gosh, a little bit
Right.
of salt.
That's right. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, because I'm also thinking about it just suddenly I was thinking about fear and how
mhm.
fear plays into internally and in the environment and even not fear like the obvious fear, right? Like if there was a break-in in your neighbors or
Right.
something happens in your neighborhood and then you feel a little more fearful because there was something logically that's happening, but also just subtle fears that you might have in turn about your body as your home and also the space where you dwell.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking, well, you're dwelling in your body. You know what I mean,
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
the environment that you're in. But I just wonder how things like resentfulness and fear and just, but subtle fear and subtle resentments and things like that play
Yes.
out. Right.
Yes. Death by a thousand cuts.
Yeah.
And believe me, and I can't enforce this enough, we die little by little and not allowing ourselves the full depth and breadth of our human experience, which includes fear, which includes anxiety, which includes sadness,
Right.
longing. So, all these other, it's been pushed over here, and it's like,
Mhm.
the wallflower who's not being asked to dance.
Yeah.
And we're pining over, like, look at us. And again, I don't know if you found this, but when you don't learn the lesson, it comes back harder.
Right. Of course.
It
Yeah.
just comes back. So it's like, okay, I'm hit with this several times over. I got to pay attention, right?
Yeah.
Even if I don't want to.
It is the wake up call, so to speak, yeah, that
Yeah,
it'll keep coming back, and you're absolutely right, these things I think that when you push against it my experience has been both personally and professionally, when you push against or push down the fear and the things that you don't wanna feel, whatever
right.
those things are, the anxiety, the grief, the disappointments, all of that, when you're trying to push it away or push it down is when it will show up in ways in your body or in other ways that you can't ignore it after a while.
Yes,
Mhm.
exactly, exactly. Our mind is powerful. I went through, and I cover hypnosis too in my course for people. Like, I went through the most amount of fatigue during my chemo, and it
Mhm.
was so intense. I didn't want to take any more pills. I decided that I was going to try hypnotherapy, and it was profoundly changed. Like, it changed my whole perspective again
Mhm.
on, oh my gosh, that I feel refreshed now. Why and how? So I think we can. we have access to face those parts of us if we allow it. And when you were talking, I thought about having a safe container. And I think a lot of times we push things away because there wasn't a safe container for those emotions when we were young.
Right.
So
Right.
if you're able to be that safe container for someone else and hold their pain with dignity
Mhm.
instead of like, oh, I can't deal with that. Like, it's I often think about the word cancer. I didn't never in a million years could I have thought it would happen to me. It happened to other people, but
Right.
how I ate well, I was exercising, like I thought I was doing all these good things.
Mhm.
So I think the stigma of anything, any problem, any societal problem, we have to kind of create a safe container for it. So it reminds me of
Mhm.
Rumi's poem, The Guest House,
Mhm.
that mean thought, that anguish, that malice, invite them in like honored guests and let them sit, even if they rend your house of its furniture. Welcome each one with a smile and open arms because that is the gift.
Mhm. Mhm. Beautiful. Great reminder. You're really reminding me of a lie that's really, I feel like it's really timely. It's
Oh,
interesting
good.
how that works, right? I'm grateful. Is there anything that we haven't covered that you were like, "Oh, I just really wanna touch on that?" Anything that's really nourishing to your mind, body, soul that we didn't cover?
My gosh, thank you for allowing me that opportunity. I just want to let your listeners know that to nourish yourself is of utmost importance. And
Mhm.
when we nourish ourselves, we nourish others,
Right,
right?
right.
And so allow yourself to commute between your shadow and your light.
Mhm.
Allow yourself to be nourished by your underworld just as much as your upper world, to be nourished in your dreams
Mhm.
while you're sleeping and your daydreams while you're awake.
Right, right. Yeah, I just really appreciate your perspective. I appreciate beauty of who you are. I mean, you're a light for others in the world, and it makes so much sense to me since we're talking that it's because you've become so friendly with your darkness, with your shadow. Like I just think that couldn't possibly be any better. Like to show how somebody is a bright light in the world because they're commuting between their shadow and their light.
Right. Thank you. Thank you
Yeah.
so much. That means a lot to me. And thank you for allowing me the
Yeah.
space to express these thoughts because sometimes, we're rushing to present
Mhm.
something of value at all times. There's a real kind of rhetoric for that.
Yeah.
But sometimes the beauty is in just listening and receiving that wisdom that I think exists inside all of us, the pomegranate seeds.
Pomegranate seeds. Yeah. And I'm hopeful that the people who are listening are seeing that that's inside of them, that they have the power and the agency to work with that and develop that.
Absolutely.
Mhm. Well, thank you. Mawish, it was so, so great to have you on the show. It's always great to talk to you. So thank you for coming on.
My pleasure, Kelly. I am sending you a big hug across the screen.
Yes, from New York City. I'll take it and I will send it back to you from sunny Florida.
Wonderful.
All right.
Wonderful.
Thank you.